A billionaire CEO is seconds away from signing a $1.5 billion deal when a cafeteria worker bursts into the boardroom and whispers just 5 words that stop everything cold. What she uncovered could have cost him his entire empire. But what happens next will change both their lives forever. If this story gave you chills, hit that subscribe button because we're just getting started. Drop A in the comments if you believe truth still matters. And share this with someone who needs to remember even the quietest voice can shake the biggest room. The boardroom was dead silent, like the calm before a financial storm. Behind polished oak tables and sleek glass walls, a dozen high-ranking executives sat stiffly waiting for one signature to change everything. The cameras, where live press was watching from the hallway, and all eyes were on Ethan Parker. At 39, Ethan was the youngest CEO in his company's history. Tall, clean-cut, the kind of leader who wore control like a second skin. In front of him lay a contract worth $1.5 billion, one that would hand over distribution rights of his life's work to the tech conglomerate Argonne Tech. It was bold, it was historic, it was moments away from being done. He picked up the pen, and then the door burst open. Security was too late to stop her. A woman in a faded blue apron, hair tied back messily. Sneakers squeaking on the marble floor, ran straight toward the board table like she didn't care who the hell she was interrupting. Gasps. A few stood up. "Ms., you can't be." She was already there. "Ethan," she whispered, breathless, leaning so close no one else could hear. Her voice shook, but her words hit like a grenade. "Don't sign it. It's a trap. They're stealing your company." For a second, no one moved. Ethan's hand froze midair. The pen slipped from his grip and clattered onto the mahogany table. One by one, board members turned toward him, eyes wide, some confused, some alarmed. The camera kept rolling. He stared at her, this girl, this dishwasher, like she had just told him his house was on fire. Because maybe she had. The room remained suspended in total silence. Security reached her, finally grabbing her by the arms, ready to escort her out. But Ethan raised a hand. "Wait," he said quietly. It was the first word he had spoken in 5 full minutes. The board shifted in their seats. His lead attorney, Vincent Hall, leaned in. "Sir, this is highly irregular. Should I call for recess?" Ethan looked down at the contract again, and for the first time, something didn't feel right. He stood up, everyone, he said, voice steady, but cool. "We're postponing the signing." Murmurs erupted. "You're what?" asked Veronica, the firm's CFO. "Something's not adding up," Ethan said. "There's a clause I want legal to review again." "You've had 3 weeks," someone snapped. "I want 3 more hours." Ethan replied, then turned and walked straight out of the room. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. But as he passed Zoe Ramirez, whose name he didn't even know yet, he glanced sideways just briefly. She didn't smile. She didn't look proud. She just nodded once, almost as if to say, "Good. Now run, because you're already behind." Outside the boardroom, the media was still waiting. Reporters peered up from behind their phones, expecting to film a handshake, a billion-dollar deal. Instead, they watched Ethan Parker walk out, expression tight, jaw set, leaving one stunned legal team and a silent Argonne Tech delegation in his wake. Inside the security office, Zoe was being questioned. "Who told you this?" an officer asked. "No one," she said. "I heard it myself." "From where the cafeteria sink, 3rd floor. The walls are thin." The officer scoffed. "You realize you just disrupted a federal-scale transaction?" Zoe folded her arms. "Yeah, and I'd do it again." Back upstairs, Ethan stood alone in his private office, staring at the signature line of a contract he no longer trusted. The words were all still there. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. The sun had long dipped behind the skyline when Ethan Parker typed the message with trembling fingers. "Meet me in the sub-level storage." 11 p.m. "Come alone." He paused, stared at the send button, then pressed it. He didn't know who this woman really was, didn't know why she risked her job or her freedom to stop him from signing a billion-dollar deal. But tonight, he was ready to find out. The underground hallway beneath Parker Tech was cold, dimly lit, and smelled faintly of metal and old ink. At 11:04 p.m., the steel door creaked open. She was already there. Zoe Ramirez stood beside a stack of paper crates, hoodie up, eyes sharp. Gone was the cafeteria apron. In its place was something more raw, more focused, someone who had nothing left to lose, and everything riding on one shot of truth. "You came," she said flatly. Ethan nodded. "You knew I would." He shut the door behind him. It echoed like a vault locking shut. Zoe didn't waste time. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a worn tablet, then a folder stuffed with printouts. "I didn't make anything up," she said. "I heard them talking while I was cleaning the third floor. Brian King, Vanessa Moore, your so-called COO and legal advisor." She tapped the screen. Audio began playing. He's too busy looking like a visionary to read the fine print. By the time Ethan signs the papers, the company's ours. Argo Holding eats him alive, and we walk with 300 mil. Ethan's breath caught. He leaned forward, listening again. He recognized Brian's smug, gravelly voice. Vanessa's soft lilt. It wasn't edited. It wasn't fake. It was betrayal, served ice cold. Zoe slid him the printouts next. "I pulled this from a public filing site. Argo Holding is registered in Panama. Vanessa and Brian are listed as silent partners. They're using Argon Tech as a shell, funneling your IP to themselves." Ethan flipped through the pages. Incorporation docs, wire transfers, even screenshots of Vanessa's private correspondence, coded but damning. "How did you get all this?" he asked, voice low. Zoe shrugged. "I used to major in forensic accounting, but I dropped out when my mom got sick. Took the first job I could to keep a roof over our heads." Ethan stared at her. "So you've been working under my nose this entire time, scrubbing floors, while holding a brain that could have cracked this wide open from the start?" "I wasn't hiding," she replied. No one ever asked. The silence that followed was thick. Ethan turned away, running a hand through his hair, the weight of her words heavier than the folder in his hand. "I trusted them," he muttered. Zoe's expression softened for the first time that night. "I know," she said. "That's how they got this far." He paced. His heart was racing now. Not from fear, but anger, humiliation, the sudden realization that everything he'd built was seconds from being stolen right in front of his face. "I never even saw this Annex C," she mentioned, he said. Zoe nodded. "Because it was slipped in late, outside regular version control. Vanessa probably used her clearance to plant it right before the board meeting." Ethan clenched his fists. "I could have signed that contract today. My name, my company, my people would have gone down with me. But you didn't sign," she said. "You listened." He looked at her then. Really looked. She wasn't some underdog trope from a charity video. She was the one person in that entire building who'd bothered to speak up while everyone else stayed silent. "I don't know what they'll do next," he said quietly, "but they'll try to bury you for this." Zoe smiled, tight and bitter. "Already did. I found the pink slip in my locker this morning. Apparently, I was disruptive to corporate operations." Ethan's jaw tightened. He picked up the contract file. "We burn them before they burn us." She arched an eyebrow. "You got a plan?" "I've got 10 hours a team of digital forensics and a board full of shareholders who hate surprises. If I show them this loud and clear, they'll turn on Brian and Vanessa in a heartbeat." Zoe zipped up her backpack. "Then, let's make some noise." Ethan opened the door, but paused. "Why did you do it?" he asked. "You could have walked away. Let me crash and burn." Zoe met his gaze. "Because I've seen what happens when good people stay quiet. And because I still believe this place could be better than the people running it." Ethan nodded once. No handshake, no promises. Just mutual fire ignited in two people who were never supposed to meet. But now that they had the empire, was never going to be the same. The morning after their secret meeting, the halls of Parker Tech buzzed like a shaken hive. Word had spread fast. CEO Ethan Parker had abruptly delayed the billion-dollar signing with Argon Tech. Executives whispered. Assistants speculated. The press circled like vultures outside the building. At exactly 9:00 a.m., an emergency all-hands meeting was called. Mandatory attendance. Every department head, every legal consultant, every board member was summoned to conference room 6A, the one used for damage control. Inside, the tension was thick. No coffee, no jokes, just silence and waiting. And then Brian King walked in. The man was calm, too calm. In his tailored gray suit, COO, Brian took the center of the room with the confidence of someone who believed he owned it. Right behind him was Zoe Ramirez, flanked by two security guards. She looked pale, lips pressed tight, but her chin was up. "This won't take long." Brian began, his voice cool and clipped. "As acting risk supervisor, I've called this session to address an internal breach we discovered late last night." Ethan entered just then quietly, taking a seat at the head of the table. He didn't speak, just nodded for Brian to continue. Zoe's eyes flicked toward him, hopeful just for a second. It was the last time she let hope get in the way. Brian held up a folder. Ms. Zoe Ramirez, recently employed in the cafeteria division, was caught accessing restricted internal documents and recording private conversations between executive staff members. Whispers rippled through the room. She claims to have done so as a whistleblower. But the evidence, he said, flipping to a projected screen, shows unauthorized entry to private files breach of Employee Code 12A and suspected data transfer to external devices. He turned to Zoe. "You're hereby terminated effective immediately. Your access is revoked, and we reserve the right to pursue legal action." Gasps. A few people leaned away from her like she carried a virus. Zoe stood frozen. "No trial, no question. Just execution," she said, voice sharp but shaking. "This isn't a trial, Ms. Ramirez," Brian replied, smiling. "It's a company, and you broke the rules." One of the guards stepped forward. Zoe turned to Ethan, her eyes locked on his. "Say something." That was what they said. Her eyes were screaming it. But Ethan stayed silent, frozen. He wasn't ready. Not yet. He hadn't verified every piece, hadn't traced every dollar, hadn't built a case strong enough to hold up in front of the board, much less the media. And in that hesitation, he watched something inside her break. Just a flicker. But it broke. Zoe didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just looked at him one last time, like she didn't recognize him anymore. And then she walked out. No one said a word. The door shut behind her like a verdict. 2 hours later, Ethan stood alone in the hallway, staring out the window. The skyline blurred in the morning heat, but his thoughts were sharper than ever. He'd failed her. He'd let them hang her out to dry so he could bide time. And, for what self-preservation cowardice, the audio was real. The documents were solid, and still he'd stood there and watched a woman who saved him get destroyed in front of a dozen executives, and said nothing. He slammed his palm into the glass jaw, clenched. Brian passed by behind him, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry, we handled it. Damage control's already rewriting the story. By the end of today, she'll be nobody." Ethan didn't respond. But inside, something snapped. They thought they'd won. Thought she was just some poor dishwasher they could wipe clean off the slate. But Zoe wasn't nobody. She was the only one who dared tell him the truth, and she deserved better than silence. Back in his office, Ethan pulled out the folder Zoe had given him the night before. The files, the audio, the receipts, all of it. He put in his AirPods and listened again to Brian's voice, cold and smug. By the time he signs the company's hours, Parker Tech becomes Argonne's puppet, and Ethan won't know what hit him. His hand hovered over the intercom button, then pressed. "Get me every version of the Argon Tech contract. I want to see timestamps, metadata, digital trails, everything. I want to know who accessed what and when." He stood up. No more waiting, no more fear. Brian had fired the first shot. Ethan Parker was going to fire back, and this time he wouldn't miss. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. The silence in his penthouse apartment was too loud. The city lights outside his window blurred into static. His mind kept replaying the scene in that boardroom, Zoe standing alone while he watched paralyzed as they stripped her of everything. He'd made a mistake, a big one. Now he was going to fix it. By 2:17 a.m. he had his entire legal archive pulled up across 3 monitors. Every email, every draft of the Argon Tech deal, every contract note, every digital signature. And then he found it. Annex C. The infamous addendum that no one had voted on. A clause that would quietly shift 85% of Parker Tech's equity to Argo Invest Holding, a firm Ethan had never even heard of until Zoe mentioned it. It wasn't just shady, it was criminal. He leaned closer, Fingers flying across the keyboard, digging deeper. There was no board approval, no timestamp in the internal voting record, no legal routing through their internal governance chain. This thing was slipped in by hand. By 3:09 a.m., he made a call not to the Parker Tech legal team, but to someone he could trust, a private attorney from outside the company, someone who owed him a favor. Charlie Ethan said into the phone, "I need you to dig into a company. Argo Invest Holding, Panama-based. Look into the corporate structure, registered owners, any shell affiliations." Charlie didn't ask questions, just said, "I'll call you in 2 hours." Ethan stood at the window, arms crossed. The night outside felt colder now. By 5:23 a.m., the call came back. Charlie's voice was low and serious. "Ethan, you're not going to like this. Hit me. Argo Invest Holding is a dummy corporation. No public trading, no staff, no online presence, but it's legally registered to 2 names." Ethan's heart stopped. Who? Brian King and Vanessa Moore? The room tilted. Vanessa Moore? His ex. The woman who once said she'd never betray him even when she left the company. Now she was working with Argontech as a legal advisor. This wasn't just business, it was personal. Ethan slammed the laptop shut so hard the lid cracked. His breathing turned sharp. He turned toward the framed photo on his desk, an old team picture back when the company first hit $100 million in revenue. He, Brian, and Vanessa, all smiling, all full of dreams. With a single swipe of his arm, Ethan sent it crashing to the floor. Glass shattered. He stared at the broken pieces, the faces fractured. They played you, Parker, and you let them. But not anymore. He picked up his phone again. No hesitation this time. "Call the IT forensics team." He barked into the intercom. "Private request. I want every log of internal contract access in the last 60 days. Who viewed it? Who edited it? What device they used? And get me Vanessa's last 5 email logs." The assistant on the other end stuttered, "Sir, she's not with Parker Tech anymore. She's with Argon Tech. I don't care if she's with the moon." Ethan growled. "Her credentials were used to slip in an unvoted document on my company's system. I want everything she touched." He hung up. The adrenaline was back. The fire was back. He wasn't going to be a pawn in their little power game. Not when they almost made him destroy his own legacy with his own hand. "You almost signed it. You almost handed them the empire." But Zoe didn't let him. And now he was done hesitating, done watching. He was going to strike. And the whole damn tower they'd built on lies was going to come crashing down. The sun hadn't even burned off the morning haze when Ethan Parker pulled his black SUV into a cracked driveway on the west side of the city. He didn't belong here. The buildings were sagging. Paint peeled off every wall. A rusted "no trespassing" sign swung lazily from a chain-link fence. But he parked anyway. No driver, no bodyguard, just him and the weight of the truth. Apartment 6B, that's where she lived. He climbed the stairs, one creaking step at a time, until he reached her door. No brass nameplate, just chipped paint, a torn welcome mat, and a doorbell that didn't work. So he knocked, hard, nothing. Then footsteps. The door cracked open, and there she was. Zoe, no apron, no sarcasm, just a tired, pale version of the woman who'd risked everything to save his company. She blinked, stunned. "What the hell are you doing here?" she asked, voice low, defensive. Ethan took a breath. "I need to talk to you." "You had your chance," she snapped, starting to close the door. He stopped it with his hand, not forcefully, just enough. "I didn't believe you," he said, eyes locking onto hers. "And because of that, I almost lost everything." She froze. He continued. "I've seen the contract metadata, the backdated logins, the Panama Corporation. Everything you said, it was real. And I stood there while they humiliated you in front of a room full of liars." Zoe didn't speak. From inside the apartment, a weak cough echoed wet, painful, raw. Zoe turned, and for the first time, Ethan saw her real life. In the dimly lit room behind her was a hospital bed, machines humming. An older woman lay there frail and fighting her mother. Ethan stepped back. "I'm sorry," he said, voice quiet now. "I didn't know." Zoe crossed her arms. "Yeah, well, knowing doesn't fix anything." "I know," he replied. "That's why I covered her treatment. Last week, anonymously. She narrowed her eyes. What the oncology ward at Grace Memorial? All of it. Paid. I didn't want to make it about me. I owed you. And it still doesn't come close. She stared at him, eyes wide, then guarded. You did that, I did. And I'm not here for thanks. Silence. The street outside buzzed with the usual morning chaos sirens, buses, dogs barking, but between them, everything went still. Then Zoe stepped aside just enough. Come in, she said. Inside the apartment smelled of lemon cleaner and cheap coffee. Ethan stood awkwardly in the middle of the small living room while Zoe checked her mother's IV line. She sleeps a lot now, Zoe murmured, her voice softer. Stage 4 lung cancer. She used to be a biology teacher. Ethan swallowed hard. I'm sorry. Zoe turned, arms crossed again. So what do you want, Parker? He didn't sugarcoat it. I want to bring them down. Brian, Vanessa. The whole damn scam. I have the forensics. I have the timing. But I need your help. Help you saw it firsthand. You heard the conversations. You collected the proof before anyone else even noticed. And whether you want to believe it or not, you're the reason I'm still standing. She looked away. Doesn't mean I trust you. You don't have to, he said. Just trust what we're fighting for. A pause. Then she asked, And what's that? He answered, without hesitation. Truth. Her jaw tightened. Her mother coughed again, and Zoe turned, adjusting her pillow with care, brushing hair from the woman's damp forehead. Something cracked in her expression, something between exhaustion and fierce love. I'm in, she whispered, without turning back. Ethan exhaled, tension flooding out of his shoulders. But on one condition, she added. Name it. When this is over. I don't go back to scrubbing floors. Ethan nodded. Deal. No handshake, no smile. Just an unspoken contract between two people who had every reason to walk away, but didn't. And just like that, the alliance was reborn, not with champagne or headlines, but in a broken apartment above a broken street where two broken people decided to fight back. Together. The following Monday, just after 10:00 a.m., every major investor and senior executive at Parker Tech received a single-line email from the CEO's office. Emergency shareholders meeting. Noon, full attendance required. No explanation. No leaks. Whispers flew. Brian King smirked when he read it. Vanessa Moore smiled behind her coffee. They thought they knew the game, thought they were 10 moves ahead. They had no idea. By 11:57 a.m., the boardroom was packed. Not a single empty chair. Tension buzzed through the air like static before a storm. Ethan Parker sat alone at the head of the table, calm, collected, eyes sharper than ever. At 12:02, Brian and Vanessa walked in. Vanessa looked impeccable, in a navy blue power suit. Brian carried his usual arrogance like a second skin. Should we expect a eulogy or a surrender? He joked, taking a seat. Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he reached for the remote. The room went dark. A single audio file began to play. He's too busy playing visionary. Once he signs, Ethan will be holding nothing but his title. And the company ours. Gasps. The voice was unmistakable Brian's. Then Vanessa's followed smooth and icy key, Roy LeSung. Ethan will have nothing. You and I walk with 300 mil, and Argo buries the trail. The lights came back on. The silence was deafening. Vanessa's smile vanished. Brian looked like someone just pulled the floor from under him. Ethan stood. This, he said calmly, was recorded 3 nights ago. Without your knowledge. Not by me, but by someone you never thought was listening. He clicked again. Screens lit up with files, bank transfers, shell company documents, ownership filings for Argo Invest Holding registered in Panama. 2 names attached, Brian King and Vanessa Moore. Ethan continued, voice steady but cold. You falsified contract terms slipped in Annex C without board consent and attempted to transfer 85% of Parker Tech equity to a foreign shell company you both secretly own. Brian tried to speak, but Ethan cut him off. This isn't up for debate. These documents were verified by a third-party law firm and digital forensics. They've been shared with the board, the media, and, he paused as the door opened, the police. 2 officers stepped in. Brian King And Vanessa Moore, the lead officer, announced, "You're under arrest for corporate fraud conspiracy and attempted theft of private assets." Vanessa didn't move. Her jaw clenched, lips pursed, like she could still spin it all into control. Brian stood defiant. "You have no right. You gave that up when you tried to sell what wasn't yours," Ethan replied. The officers cuffed them both. Brian shouted something incoherent. Vanessa, however, turned once, just once, to look Ethan in the eye. "You're too soft," she said. "This world doesn't belong to men who believe in truth." Ethan didn't flinch. He walked toward her, looked her dead in the eye, and replied, "Maybe not, but I'd rather lose everything than become what you are." Then she was gone. The door shut. The room exhaled. No applause, no cheers. Just the quiet reckoning of people who had almost let a company fall into the wrong hands, if not for one whistleblower. And a man who finally chose to stand up. Ethan took a breath, looked at the board. "We clean house," he said. "Starting today." No one disagreed. Weeks passed. The scandal had made headlines. Boardrooms across the city whispered the name Parker Tech, like it was a legend that almost crumbled. But behind all the noise, something quieter was happening. Something better. Ethan Parker stood in the middle of the newly renovated cafeteria. Gone were the gray walls and flickering lights. It had been transformed, warm lighting, natural wood tables, fresh air, and real food. But more than that, the place had a soul again. Because at the center of it all stood Zoe Ramirez. No longer wearing a cafeteria badge, now dressed in sharp business casual security credentials around her neck. Head of Internal Risk and Ethics. She spotted him standing awkwardly by the coffee station, still not used to being the one who approached first. She smiled, but only a little. "Didn't expect you here today," she said, arching an eyebrow. "I had to see the new queen of the lunchroom in action," Ethan replied. They shared a short laugh. But underneath, it was something deeper. Earned. "I was thinking," he said, suddenly nervous. "You've been working a lot. Taking care of your mom. Cleaning up the mess I let happen." "I've been fine," she said, guarded, but kind. "Yeah, I know. But maybe it's time we both did something not tied to saving a company." She tilted her head. "Like what? Like this?" Ethan reached into his pocket. No velvet box, no flashy lights, just a simple gold band, clean and timeless. He held it out. "I've spent most of my life in rooms full of lies," he said. "People smiled at me because they needed something. They cheered when I signed things they wrote. But you—" He looked straight into her eyes. "You were the first person who told me the truth. Not to hurt me, not to use me, but to save me." Zoe's breath hitched. She didn't move, not yet. "I don't want perfect," he said. "I want real. I want someone who challenges me, who keeps me honest, who fights for what matters, even when it's messy. Especially when it's messy." A pause. Then with a half smile, "I want you." He didn't kneel. He didn't need to. She stepped closer, heart pounding, looked at the ring, then at him. "You were silent when I needed you to speak," she said quietly. "But in the end, you chose to stand up." He nodded. "That's what matters," she whispered. And then finally, she nodded. "I say yes." The wedding was small. A sunset beach just outside San Diego. No guest list of VIPs or tech moguls. Just a handful of friends, the soft crashing of waves, and a rented wheelchair, where Zoe's mother sat beneath a shawl, smiling through tears. Zoe wore a cream-colored dress, simple, elegant. Ethan wore rolled sleeves and no tie. They held hands under a driftwood archway, barefoot in the sand. No photographers, no press, just vows, whispered promises made, and hearts healed. And as the sun dipped behind the horizon, the final frame faded in Parker and Ramirez, trust above all. Because at the end of the day, empires can be rebuilt. But trust. That's the real legacy. Life lesson from the story. Speak up even when it's hard. In a world that often rewards silence and punishes truth-tellers, this story reminds us of one powerful truth. Integrity still matters. Zoe was just a cafeteria worker, overlooked, underestimated. But she chose to speak up even when it cost her everything. And because she did, an empire was saved. Ethan, a CEO at the top of the world, nearly lost it all because he trusted the wrong people and ignored the quiet voices. But when he finally listened and stood up, he found something even more valuable than power purpose. This isn't just a story about corporate betrayal. It's a reminder that truth doesn't whisper forever. Eventually, it demands to be heard. So whether you're leading a company or working night shifts, your voice matters. Don't underestimate the power of doing what's right, even when it's hard, even when you're scared. If this story inspired you, drop a comment below and tell us your favorite moment, or share a time when speaking up changed everything. And don't forget to subscribe for more true-to-life stories that prove courage can come from anywhere.